Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I always start that way because I don't know when you're going to watch the video. This particular discussion is to review the initial video that's up on the construction of economic theory, but then to extend that into the last several slides, which includes, would you please put that away, sir? Good. Which includes the circular flow model and so forth. So this is review. So economics is often defined by these horrible book definitions that say economics is the study of the allocation of scarce resources among alternative ends or goals. And I have my own definition, obviously, and I define economics as being a science that analyzes how people behave under this constraint of what we call scarcity. So as I said to you last time, it really is the study of people making choices, the study of how people go about making choices amongst alternatives. We employ the scientific method, meaning that we adopt what is called positive analysis as opposed to normative statements. And this is a distinction that you really want to own as you are observing all the information that you get, the lectures, the videos, the articles that you read in all of your various classes. You want to be able to distinguish between positive statements and normative statements. Positive means an objective, descriptive statement. The lights in this room generate 12 lumens per square foot. The walls are gray. There's a table on my left. I'm recording this video. Those are all just factual statements. The people in this room are women. That is a factual statement. Y'all with me? Turns out to be false. So the fact that something's positive doesn't mean it's true. It simply means it's an objective observation of reality. The key that students often use to make the distinction is positive describes what is or what will be, and normative describes what ought to be or what should be. So normative includes a value judgment. Normative statements include a value judgment. Many times, what appears to be a logical argument is in fact a normative analysis. The example I used before was that LA is growing at 7% per year. We're currently using 98% of our water treatment facilities, so LA needs to build a new water treatment facility. It sounds like it's just logical, right? It sounds like it just flows, like this is what's happening, therefore we have to do this. But where the normative comes in is with the use of the word needs, and needs is a normative statement. You are Ashley, when you say to someone, I need to do something, what are you, I need to go to the store. What information are you giving them?
You're stating a fact.
Good. You're stating a situation.
Yeah, letting them know what you're doing.
Okay, good, good. And it just says that's what I'm going to do, right? It just says that's what I'm going to do. So the word needs suggests an infinite value. The word needs suggests you just have to do this. Y'all with me? I have to do this. I have to do this. Within economics, there are always trade-offs. There are always alternatives. Nothing has absolute value. There's always a willingness to give up some of anything if it's possible to get more of another good or group of goods. It's the assumption of gross substitution. People are willing to make trade-offs if the ratio of value is such. So just to finish that story, the city decides they're going to put a head tax out of $10,000 a piece. You all get bills for it. Assume you all live in LA City. And all of a sudden, the people respond by saying, wait a minute, what is this? I can't afford to pay $10,000. Good. What action could you take to avoid having to pay the $10,000? It's a legal taxation by the city council, so you can't go to court and get it overturned. You could move, right? And I may have mentioned this, but Larry Turnbull was a colleague of mine from Washington State University, and he coined this phrase, vote with your feet. and demonstrating that people respond to incentives. And he actually got like 4 different articles out of it, simply this one concept of voting with your feet. But yeah, absolutely. You know, you can move right across the street, you know, and the other side of the street's Culver City, and you can get out of it in that way. Once that occurs, what happens to the, quote, need for this new facility? Well, it's not there because population now is declining as opposed to rising at 7%. So it's an example of how an argument can be constructed that appears to be simply logical, but in fact contains a value judgment. We go about constructing theory by, first of all, abstracting from reality. To build a theory that is applicable beyond the existing set of data, you have to abstract from all the details. If I were to build a theory based on all the information about you, everything, how you're sitting, what you're writing with, you know, what glasses or no glasses, and hair and no hair, and so forth, if I incorporated all of those in my assumptions of the theory, then the theory would only be applicable to this class. Y'all with me? You can't use the same theory if you're going to incorporate all of that data. So when we build theories, we abstract from all the details and we focus in on what we think is most valuable to solve a particular problem. Example I used before was, if I ask you who plays basketball well, what would you look for? No, you.
Height.
Yeah, height. Why did you choose height?
A lot of NBA players are very tall.
Good. There's 2 ways you might have reached that conclusion. One is, well, most of the NBA players are really tall, and if you've ever met any in person, they are like gigantic people. They really are. I met Magic, and he's like gigantic. And number 2, or you could have reached the same conclusion by just thinking about the game. Well, the hoop is 10 feet off the ground. Taller people would be closer to it. They should be able to get the ball through more easily. Good. But notice what he did. He your name is?
Jack.
Jack? Jack abstracted from all the things he might have observed about you and focused just on one factor that he thought was most predictive. Y'all with me? That's how you build theory. You look at what things do I think are most valuable in solving a particular problem or in making a particular kind of prediction. The key to success, as I said to you last time, is definitions. And we basically make up words to describe the things that we're talking about, the things that we're seeing. Definitions are the key to understanding any theory or any field of study. And it's interesting to think about when children first learn language, they learn words in pairs. So something is this or it's that. You're in or out, it's up or down, it's left or right, it's hot or cold, it's fat or thin, it is tall or short, it is Muslim or Christian, it is one of 2 things in that particular way. And I would suggest to you that all the major problems in the world come about from people thinking in a biometric matter like that. My favorite example is the wars between Northern Ireland and Southern Ireland. And the wars went on for years, and they fought each other. And then Sinn Féin is the army of the Northern, and they raided the South, and then they blew up people's houses and killed kids and all kinds of stuff. What was the distinction between the 2 groups? Well, it was North and South, but what was the difference in their societies? It was religion. Good. And the Northern Ireland were Protestants who mainly had come over from England, and the southern portion of the island, which is most of it, were Catholics. But those are both Christian religions. Y'all with me? Those are just variations of the Christian religion. But once you get that in your mind, that it's this or it's that, then, okay, you're a Catholic, so you're bad, right? And we're right and you're wrong, and so forth. Look at the situation in Israel today and the East Bank. The Palestinians versus the Jewish people. all of them want the same thing. People are 99.9% the same. People all want a safe place to live. They want good food. They want an opportunity to earn and raise children safely and enjoy food and music. And everybody wants the same things, right? But when you narrow it down to just this one issue, which in this case is religion, then all of a sudden, if that's all you focus on, then all of a sudden it's like, no, we can't, and then you have wars and you have all this stuff. Look at the Muslim religion. It's made up of two major sects, the Sunnis and the Shias. They're both Muslim religions, and there's some differences in believing who was most important or something along that line, but they're fighting each other constantly and killing each other constantly. Years ago, there was a book called Men Are From Mars and Women Are From Venus, and the author was a woman who argued that men and women are totally different, and they can never understand each other. Men come from this red warlike planet, and so men are testosterone machines, and they're doing this, and then women come from Venus, and Venus is closer to the sun, and so women are closer to the source of heat and light and God and knowledge and so forth. Men and women want the same things in life, right? There's a difference between men and women. I totally agree with that. Viva la différence. But you know, there are some women who are extremely feminine, then some who are kind of average, and some who are somewhat masculine. There are men who are somewhat effeminate, and then standard, and then very masculine men. It's a continuum of matters of degree. And so that is the economic perspective, and that is how economics differs from something like accounting or other ways of thinking about things. Economists think about the world as existing in a continuum of small degrees of change along a continuum or along a spectrum. When kids first learn about colors, kids in the rest of the world get a little piece of cardboard, and it has three colors on it, and they are the primary colors, red, yellow, and blue. And then they're taught that if you mix red and yellow together, you get a new color, which is what? Orange. And if you mix yellow and blue together, you get a new color, which is called green. What's fascinating in working with kids in definitions is that they know what red is. They know exactly what red is because it's there on the cardboard, right? That's red, and that's yellow, and that's blue. But the word orange is a very slippery term for them because you could have an orange that's almost all red and a little tiny bit of yellow, right? A really deep, deep orange. Or you can have a yellowish orange, and green, the same thing. You can have a pea green that's mostly green with, which is mostly yellow with a little bit of blue, or a really deep, green of a lot of blue and a little bit of yellow. So when you got to junior high school, middle school, you learned the colors of the rainbow: red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, and violet. You added two more sexy colors at the end. And you were taught that there's a spectrum, and it's based on the wavelengths of light. And red is a shorter wavelength, and then it becomes longer. And so you learn some additional terms to define this continuum of going on. The story I told is, suppose you hired an interior decorator to come out and give you advice. And he meets with you and sees the property, and I said, make sure he meets with your significant other. And he comes back, and he charges like $3,000 to do this. And he says, well, we're going to do the kitchen in yellow, the living room in blue, and the bedroom in red. What would be your opinion of the quality of this guy? What would be your opinion? It's Sarah, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd be kind of unsure since that isn't very specific. That can mean a lot, and
Yeah.
there's some really ugly yellows out there.
Yeah, right. Those are children's words, right? Those are children's words. What you want, and I hope the slide works. There it is. What you want is these much finer differentiations, like a dark goldenrod, cayenne, cornflower blue, much more specific along that continuum. So words divide up the continuum, and the more advanced the problem is, the smaller is that increment that's being described by the definition. So in economics, we look at small degrees of change, and it means that we use what's called marginal analysis. Marginal analysis. Marginal means additional. So we talk about marginal value. How much you value having one more Heineken's beer. We talk about marginal revenue when we study the firm. What's the additional revenue from selling one more unit, or the additional cost of producing one more unit? So that's the methodology that economists use, is to use this marginal analysis to study people making these choices amongst alternatives. So as I said, we abstract from reality, we define terms, and then we set up the assumptions of the model, the key observations of reality, objective, that we think will guide us in terms of moving forward. And then you close the window on reality, and you simply say, if these assumptions are true, what logically follows from that? And so my point is that the implications follow directly from the assumptions. And the two together make up what is called a hypothesis. It means the theory is usually expressed in this way. If, and then you state the assumptions in the model, then you state the implications. So a hypothesis is a way of describing a theory, is a statement of a theory. Finally, we noted that we adopt theories by the virtue of how well does the theory predict. You don't want to adopt a theory because of how many equations there are in it, or how many millions of dollars have been spent on equipment. When you all get out in business, you're going to be constantly bombarded with people who are presenting you with theories. And the theories are software packages, right? And they're going to tell you, this is what my package does, and this is why you ought to do it. Or locations, or buildings, or whatever these alternatives are. But they're going to suggest that theirs is the best, and often we use price as a measure or an estimate of value because markets generally work. Something that sells for more is more satisfying to somebody, maybe not for your particular use, but to somebody, the higher price does connote a higher value. So as I said, we adopt theories on how well the theory predicts, not on these other characteristics about it. And I did that. And this was the example I used in the other film, where you had competing theories about earthquakes. It turns out that the bat people have been predicting correctly all over the world to the city and the day, and so the economist would go with the bat people's prediction because that's the one that has the best record of prediction. So we said we're going to define terms, and we start with very simple definitions. We talk about goods as being anything that an individual would like to have more of, measured at zero price. Now notice, again, this has a red star on it. That means something in the slide is something you want to know, which in this case is the definition of a good. Notice all the parts of the definition. Number one, when you talk about a good, you're meaning it's anything which you value. And so the ones we normally think about are material goods. Think about a new car, think about a new sweatshirt, or whatever the case may be. But notice that most of the value in your life, or much of the value in your life, comes from non-material things. Personal abilities, the ability to put the tennis ball in the corner of the service area at 120 miles an hour with an Australian twist. That's what I want more of. And friendships. I mean, so much of the joy we get out of life is our interaction with other people. Friendship, honor, love, respect, all those are highly valued aspects of reality. And the reason I'm stressing this is when we talk about goods, always keep in mind that it's not just material stuff we're talking about. It's everything that brings you satisfaction. And you all make trade-offs all the time, right, between material and non-material kinds of activities. It has to be something that an individual wants to have. So if it's a good, it means I desire to have more of it. I like the flavor and the effect of Bombay Sapphire gin mixed with a tiny amount of Nolly Pratt vermouth. To many of you, gin tastes like medicine, right? And so from my perspective, it's a good, because I would like to have more of it. From your perspective, it's not a good. There's all kinds of stuff out there that are not goods from your perspective. You with me? I mean, you can walk down the center of the Northridge Fashion Center, and there are all these glass cubicles on both sides, and there's all this stuff inside of these locations. And a lot of it I don't want at all, right? A lot of it I wouldn't take if you gave it to me for free, right? I wouldn't be caught dead wearing that, right? So it has to be something that you want to have, more of. And then it has to be something you want to have more of. So we're interested in the number of units in a time period. As long as you desire to have an additional unit, it's included as a good. If at that moment you don't want the third muffin, and you wouldn't choose it if it was available free, then it's not a good from your perspective. And by the way, your analysis of whether something is a good or not a good can change instantaneously. Y'all with me? We always make decisions at a moment in time. We make choices at a moment in time. But in the next moment, you could say, oh no, I'm going to have lunch in half an hour, so I don't want any muffins at all. So your taste and preference can change dramatically from time to time. But at any moment in time, you do have a set of desires of things that you would like to have more of. And again, we're looking just at your wants now. In the term good, it just means it's something you want to have. How much you will buy is a more complex calculation. It depends on a whole bunch of other factors. So that's what goods are. They're the things out there that bring me satisfaction in life. A resource we can define as being anything which can be used to produce goods. Anything at all which could be used to produce those things we would like to have is called a resource. Standard resources you learned in the introductory classes were land, labor, and capital. Land means all of the attributes of a specific geographic location, including proximity, including weather, proximity to water, the view from that, what is on the land, what is under the land. All of those are characteristics. In fact, you might put in, oh, I have it there, sometimes called natural resources as a category of resources. Labor simply means people, and I would suggest to you that people are one of the major resources in your life, because it's these interactions with people that bring us joy and satisfaction in the ways that we talked about. And then finally, capital is the actual stuff. It's buildings and equipment. In finance, capital is referred to as money. In economics, if I want to talk about money, I will call it money. So capital means real stuff out there. There's both human capital, which is abilities of individuals, and then there's standard capital, which is the actual buildings and equipment. And I'd like to add another category, and that is time. Time is a resource. When I ask people, what do you want more of? Some people will say, well, I want more time. And if you think about it, it's like, how does that work? I mean, how do you get more time? There was a book written about 15 years ago called Vox, V-O-X, and it won the Erotica of the Year award for a novel. And it was the story of a guy who could stop time. And he could just do this, and everybody else would stop, but he could keep going. Y'all with me? And so, you know, it's half an hour before the exam. You stop time, and then you take a nap for 4 hours, and then you study for 2 hours and have a nice dinner, and then you start time up again. That's no, that's not possible in the realm of my reality, at least. So time is a resource, and I've said to you before, I think I said this the first day, time is probably your most scarce resource, because as we talked about, you guys are trying to work, many hours a week. You're taking 12 and 15 units of classes. You have social life, right, that is part of the things you'd like to do. You may have religious obligations, family obligations, all these things. Every one of them uses up time. If I watch the Golden State Warriors play a game of basketball, which is very enjoyable to do, it uses up time, right? And eating a meal uses up time, and being here uses up your time. So time is a critical resource. I may have mentioned Randy Pausch, who was a professor of computer science at Carnegie Mellon, came down with pancreatic cancer, which is deadly, he's published 2 videos. One is called The Last Lecture, and it's been translated into 33. There's a book. It's been translated into 33 different languages. It's an excellent video. It's on YouTube. It's been seen 33 million times or something. But it's his life lessons about the things that he has realized are important to him. He also has a second video on time management, which again is an excellent video about ways to increase your effectiveness in using up time. And who would know better how scarce time is than someone who's been told you have 6 more months of quality time? He jokes about it. He says the doctors don't say you're going to die in 4 months, right? They say you have 4 months of quality time, which means you don't have the 5th month of quality time. Right? Good. So we build this on 2 very simple assumptions. One, people have unlimited wants. They simply want more. I may have told the story about the study of people who had won over $10 million in the lottery. They interviewed them like 7 years later, and like 70% of them said, I'm no better off now than I was before I got the money. And I told you, I volunteered. I said, just give me $1 million and then interview me every year, and I will tell you I'm better off now than I was before. But people just want more. When you get this distinction of material and non-material goods, people will sometimes say to me, well, the Tibetan monk does not want a new BMW. He doesn't want a stereo system. And I agree, they probably don't. But he would certainly like to have greater knowledge of the deity, right? Or a little bit more straw, or a little bit better tasting wine. I mean, people simply want more, no matter how much you acquire. And you all know there's many novels have been written about people who, and usually men, who are very, very successful in business, and they made a lot of money, and then they realized later in life that they had really blown it because the kids didn't, they had no family life, they had nobody close to them in their life because they'd been dedicating themselves just to material advancement. People want more. By the way, there's a 5-minute video of Milton Friedman he was interviewed by this liberal talk show host who I never can remember for a reason. But it's a great video because he's talking about greed, and which is the same thing. People want more, right? And it's really, Friedman is fun to watch because he's very intelligent and makes a good presentation. Number 1, unlimited wants. Number 2, limited resources. We just don't have enough to do all the things we would in fact like to do. And just going back to my previous example about time in your lives, you don't have enough time to do all the things that you want to do. Y'all with me? We just don't. We don't, as a person, as a family, as a city, as a state, as a nation, and the entire world. There's not enough resources to do all the things that we in fact would like to do. So we describe that condition as called scarcity, and it means that individually or as a society, we don't have enough resources to satisfy all of our wants or to produce all the goods that we would in fact like to have. So using it as an adjective, a good is scarce if the amount you would like to have at zero price is more than what's available at zero price. And in your notes, you want to put a qualifier or an equality. A scarce good is the same as an economic good. Y'all with me? The word economic good means the good is scarce. And it's an economic good, meaning that it carries a positive price because of the fact that the amount desired is more than what is in fact available freely. A free good is something like clean air in Montana. And that is, there's lots of it around, and the amount desired is less than what is available free. And so that's the other condition a good could be in. It's either a scarce good or a free good. And I mentioned to you that when we went to the moon, I think it was in '69, and we took these pictures, and they came back and they were shown internationally, and suddenly you actually saw the limitation of the resources, because there it is. One book was written called The Good Spaceship Earth. Another was Silent Green. And pictures are worth more than 1,000 words, because when you see this, it really made an impression on people all over the world that scarcity's there, right? That there's not enough to do all the things we would like to have. And from that was the very beginning of the and from that was a very large increase in the conservation movements all over the world and within countries and cities and so forth. Today, the word is sustainability. That's the new word for not using up resources that are non-renewable, but instead using resources that are in fact renewable in that way, like sunlight. So again, I've only made two assumptions. Unlimited wants, limited resources, but we can right away begin to derive the implications from those two competing assumptions. One is people have to make choices. We're forced to make choices. And just like you in the morning, all these things you want to do, you only have 12 hours, so you have to choose which thing am I in fact going to do with my time or my money or those kinds of things. So that is a direct implication. You have to make choices. I pointed out to you, I think last time, that if you have something that needs to be done and you put off making the decisions about it, what you can end up with is that time makes the decision for you, because as you don't do things, then options go off the table until the very last option is, well, that's all I can do, right? But you have to make choices. And then secondly, and this is probably the key definition and paradigm that economists use that is different from the way people normally think about the world. Economic cost is the value of the next best thing given up when you make a particular choice. It's called opportunity cost. It's called economic cost. It's just called cost if you're within the discussion of economics. But it means that the cost is what you gave up by making the choice that you did, the highest valued other thing that you gave up. All of you could think right now about what you would be doing right now if you weren't here. Y'all with me? All of you could be thinking, well, if I wasn't here, I'd be sleeping, which is the answer I get from almost all my students. No matter what time of day it is, I'd be sleeping, or working, or studying, or doing other things. And the thing you would have done is the cost of being here today. The value of what you would have gotten out of what you would have done is the opportunity cost. Now, notice something about that. Accounting cost is always easy to identify, right? You go to a movie and the accountant says, how much was the movie theater? How much was parking? How much was the gasoline? Okay, and the total is $14.50. That's the accounting cost, or the way people talk about cost. You ask the economist, what's the cost of going? He would say, how much was the ticket, parking, and gas? And then he would say, the cost is not the $14.50. It's what you would have bought with the $14.50. That's the opportunity cost. Plus what you would have done during the 3 hours. Y'all with me? Because what you gave up was not only the money, but the time that you spent there. So economic cost is this notion of constantly thinking about what I would have been doing. As I just pointed out, accounting costs are easy because they're observable. Economic cost is not always observable because it's the value of something that you didn't do. Y'all with me? It's the value of something you didn't do. Now in business, or as a farmer, or in production, I can sometimes know my opportunity cost. If I use the resources to grow wheat, I can't use them to grow soybeans. And so if soybeans is the highest valued other crop, then that's my opportunity cost of planting the wheat. But as I said in my other examples, some of these costs are unknown because you don't do those things. And so you don't know how much value they might have had in that particular way. And then finally, because economic cost comes from the available alternatives of what I could be doing with my resources, costs that I cannot recover, meaning things that I've spent in the past, are not part of economic cost. They are what is called sunk cost. Sunk cost. It's an expenditure of resources that I've made in the past that I've already used up and I can't get back. If you can again, the accountant would say the cost of being here is what was your tuition, divide by number of courses, divide by number of units, divide by number of class periods, and you would get $132. And they'd say that's the cost of being here today. The economist would say to you, can you get your tuition back? And the answer at some point is no. Then your tuition's a sunk cost. Y'all with me? You can't get it back whether you come to class or not. You can't get that money back, so it's not a relevant economic cost. The cost instead is the value of what you would have been doing with your time in that particular way. In 1790, in the Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam, Rudyard Kipling wrote the following verse: "The moving finger writes, and having writ moves on, nor all your piety nor wit can lure it back to cancel half a line, nor all your tears wash out a word of it." The moving finger is time. Time marches on, right? The moving finger writes, meaning you do things, and having writ moves on, nor all your piety nor wit can lure it back to cancel half a line of what you've already done, nor all your tears wash out a word of it. I may have mentioned last time my favorite application of this is you can't unring the bell. And it's such a great visual, right? You can't unring the bell, right? You can't unring it, right? And as I pointed out, you can't unsay what you have said. Once you've said it, it's done. And she reminds me of this every Valentine's Day, which is coming up, right? Do you know what you said to me? It's like this was 8 years ago. Do you know what you said to me? I said, no, honey, I know, but I didn't mean it. I know. I was on my phone. I was talking to somebody else. I was stoned. And you can't unsay what you have said. And so she gets lots of nice stuff. Good. So implications of scarcity are: 1, you have to make choices. 2, you incur economic costs in making that choice. And 3, we are in a natural state of competition with each other for the use of these scarce resources. We're in constant competition because of scarcity. If the resources are used to produce what you want, I can't use them to produce what I want. Everybody with me? I want more tennis courts. You want more bike paths, right? I want more fish raised in the wild and caught to put on top of rice. You want more cows raised to make burgers out of them and so forth. We're in a natural state of competition because of scarcity. People have written books, by the way, about capitalism that say capitalism causes competition. No, scarcity causes competition. There's competition in every country of the world, whether it's capitalistic, socialistic, totalitarian, it doesn't matter. There's some form of competition to determine how resources, in fact, get used. And so I pointed out you could go back and think historically about how competition, the forms of competition that have existed over time. And the primary form is violence or threat of violence. Go back to nature, go back to cave people. That was the means by which people competed. And it's very costly, obviously, because it uses up resources and people, right? A very costly form of competition. As societies developed and as language developed amongst these tribes, we began to move towards adopting what's called social political forms of competition. Social political competition. Goods are allocated based on some limited criteria or behavior. So it's like all of these things we do in life, many of them are allocated by virtue of a set of rules. First place team in the NFL. All the teams would like to be first place, right? What is the method of allocating? Well, there are all these rules. You can have so many men on the field and so many people, and then you have 4 chances to go 10 yards, and then if you do this, you get 2 points, and then this is 3 points, and so many minutes, and so forth and so on. President of the United States is a scarce good. A lot of people would like to be president. A lot of people wish they were president. It's allocated, as you know, not simply on general voting, but it's allocated on this very complex system of allocating votes by states. And there's and then the college meets, and what's it called? The Electoral College, thanks. And then that's what determines who actually gets the job. But there's all these informal rules, too, about how you can compete. You can't compete with dollar ads using hard money within 30 days of the actual election. And then other people can compete, like your PACs and other organizations can spend money in various ways. But there's a whole set of rules about that. One of my favorite examples is, though, your friendship is a scarce good. Your friendship is a scarce good. What is your name? Not you. Yes. No.
Oh, sorry.
No. Yeah. What? Amanda. Good. Amanda, how do you decide which people you will extend friendship to? How do you choose friends? What things are important to you? Good. Absolutely right. Their morality, right? Their morality, and most people want people who have similar morality to themselves. If you're a strict evangelical Christian, then you want people who have the same set of beliefs that you have. What's interesting about it is, if you're kind of a slippery person, right? You don't want friends who are really uptight about stuff. You want friends who are also flexible about their morality. Good. And then all the other things that go into it. Similar interests, right? Ability to communicate easily, a sense of humor. All of these things are things we all look at in allocating our friendship, because your friendship is scarce. You can't be friends with everybody, right? You have other things that you want to accomplish in life. Finally, as societies develop further, we came about a third general category of competition called economic or market competition. And as you know, this is a system where I compete by producing value for other people. I earn dollars, which are the medium of exchange, and then I can use the dollars to vote for the things I want to acquire more of. So it's a system of competitive exchange. I produce value for others. The more value I can produce, the more dollars I can take in. And so I have an incentive to produce things that people want. And then I can use those to compete for the things I would like to buy or acquire in the system. So every society uses all three of these. In every society, violence is an element of competition for certain things. I tell the story that if you have a brand new Mercedes and you leave it at the top of your driveway in Beverly Hills with the keys in the ignition, the chances are it will be there tomorrow morning. And the reason is that there are all these vehicles driving around with shields on them and lights on top. Y'all with me? If you leave a 1974 Toyota Corolla on the streets of East LA for 5 minutes with the keys in the ignition, it will be gone. And my daughter learned that lesson. Gone. It was a Thursday. Friday night, the cops called and said they'd found the car and they'd hauled it to a yard. But they were closed on Saturday and Sunday, and so I had to pay the storage for Saturday and Sunday also, right? Because I couldn't get the car. And I said something about, is it drivable? And the guy just burst out laughing. He said, no, it doesn't have any tires. It doesn't have an engine, right? And so violence is prevalent in some areas. And then if you go across the world, violence is the major form of competition in Syria and Iraq and Afghanistan and so forth. I doubt very much that any of you own a Kalashnikov rifle, right, with ammunition, or an M16. In Iraq, everybody owns a Kalashnikov, which is the Russian version of the M16 rifle, and ammunition. And the reason is because violence is a major form of competition. We suggested, why don't you guys run a democracy? You ought to have a democracy, right? A democracy is one of the most difficult forms of managing a country. And so these people would run for office and then they'd just be killed, right? They'd just be killed. In fact, you guys read, all over the world, some dictator, and then, in fact, just happened last night in Moscow. They arrested this guy who was the major political opponent of Putin, and there's video of them grabbing him and putting him into the bus and so forth. So every society uses some amounts of violence. Every society uses some amounts of political competition also, as the examples I gave you. Lots of things are allocated politically and differing amounts depending upon the overall form of government. A country like France, which is a socialistic country, allocates a lot more, or controls the allocation of resources a lot more through their set of restrictive laws on the free exchange of contracts and economic activity. In France, if you are hired for a permanent job and you're there 90 days, it's almost impossible for your employer to fire you within the first 2 years. I mean, these are all laws that were passed to protect labor, right? To protect labor. But the problem is that if that's the case, then I'm going to put capital equipment in instead of hiring workers. Y'all with me? Everybody gets 5 weeks vacation. Everybody in France gets 5 weeks vacation. And one of my students corrected me. I had said 5 weeks paid vacation. And she said, no, it's 3 weeks paid vacation, but 5 weeks vacation. So you can take 2 weeks off without pay. Everybody, you wait tables. The month of August, all of France except for Paris shuts down in August because everybody goes on vacation. They all go down to Spain and fight with the German tourists for domination. German tourists are the worst. SmithKline is a major pharmaceutical manufacturer, and about 10 years ago they opened a new plant 90 miles northeast of Paris, and the entire plant is capital equipment. There are no workers. There's 9 guys who are the programmers, right? And they're guys that unload stuff and put it into the plant. But everything is done automatically. And they make 70 different drugs with 5 modalities each in 35 different languages. And it's all done electronically. You guys have seen the videos of the jars going by and the pills going in, etc. The reason is that labor is very, very difficult to work with, and the machines work 24/7, right? And they don't take 5 weeks off in the summertime. So every society has a combination of all three. Every analysis of political systems, almost always the primary goal is fairness. You want to design a system that is fair. And fair can't mean equal because you have scarcity. So fair means an equal opportunity to compete in the system of competition. Well, violence is clearly not fair because some people are really good at it, others are not. Social political is not fair because people have different skills and different abilities. Some people can swim really fast, so they'd have an advantage if swimming was the method of competition. Some people can argue really well, so if arguing was the means of competition, they would have an advantage. My attorney is really good at arguing. She was raised in a family that argues all the time, and so whenever I have a problem, I just sick her on it, and she goes and does discovery and just pounds them with interrogatories and all kinds of stuff. So any one of those systems, because it's based on a limited set of behaviors or characteristics, it gives an advantage to somebody, right, in that way. And finally, economic competition is not fair because some people are extremely productive. Number one, some people come into the world with lots of money. Y'all with me? Some people are born into families that have lots of dollars. They can use the dollars to make your life really good. All of the people at USC have perfect teeth and have perfect eyesight and so forth. So economic competition is not fair. And then again, some people are very, very productive. Some people just have really tremendous skills in many, many different areas. And then at the other end of the spectrum, there's some people who have really limited abilities, right? You have physical limitations, you have sight, and what do we call these people? Challenged, or what's the word? You can't call them disabled anymore. You have to call them what?
I've heard differently able, but
No, there's challenged. Is it challenged? I don't know. But anyway, you can't call them disabled anymore. But they're limited in their abilities and so forth. But I would suggest to you that the market is probably the most fair of any of those systems, because within the market system, you can do anything that other people desire. And if you do it really well, you can earn a lot of dollars. And just think of all the different things. You know, your parents noticed when you were young that you were really good at solving problems with people. You know, on the playground, you'd say, what's the problem? And then, okay, well, why don't we share 10 minutes each? I mean, you had ways of working, understanding people and working with them. You got a degree in psychology, PhD in psychology. Can you make many dollars being a psychiatrist? Dr. Phil. He makes millions of dollars. Number one, he has a lot of stars who are clientele. But he has a TV show where he brings on these really stupid people, and then he tells them, you are really stupid, right? Why did you let him do that to you, right? Talking about codependency and stuff like that. So you can do it in that way. Somebody else, Sarah's parents noticed that she has an affinity for classical music. And so they provide you with a violin when you were 5, and you practice day in and day out, and you become a great violinist. You can make a lot of money doing that, right? Bono, isn't that the guy's name, the singer?
yeah.
Right? It makes a fortune, right? Singing. And then all the rappers, right? They just have figured out this means of communication that's very popular, and then they get better or at it and make a lot of money doing that. You can't do any of these things, right? Not you, but you. But you can throw a little white ball really fast, and you can make it move around. Can you make many dollars doing that, right? $1 million contracts, right? Shaq takes this big orange ball and throws it through a hoop, makes millions of dollars doing it. My favorite is Beckham. Beckham is a soccer player for the L.A.
He's retired now.
What?
He's retired.
Oh, he did?
Yeah.
Oh, I'll have to put this in the retired column. But he was hired by the
LA
Galaxy at $125 million a year. $125 million a year because he can kick a black and white ball and make it bend, right? Bend him like Becker. And then the first year he hurt his ankle, so he didn't play, but he went to Europe and played in Europe, made more money. So, and then some people can't do any of these things. but they're really attractive by society standards, right? These, what is it, the Kardashians, right? And they make millions of dollars just because they're attractive people, right? So, and you can do anything. You can make hot sauce. You can serve wonderful food. You can create music. You can create clothing, a clothing line. You can do anything that other people would like to have, and if you can do it well enough, you can make a lot of dollars doing it. So violence is not fair. Social political is not fair. Economics not fair. What's true? Life's not fair, right? Get over it, right? Get over it. I taught the international MBA program. I taught in the international MBA program at USC, and it's an 18-month program, and these are people who are making a lot of money already. Like they come from all over the world, and they're really smart, and they're leaving jobs where they're earning $125,000, $150,000 a year to get this executive MBA program. But unlike CSUN, USC promotes social interaction between faculty and students. And so every Friday, there's a beer bust, and everybody goes and has a drink and just mixes with students and faculty and talk about life and so forth. And after the class, the last one, I had a Japanese woman come up to me and say, "Your class has changed my life." And as a faculty, when you hear that, it's like, oh, right. Is that a good thing? Right. She said, in fact, I have another story to tell you about that, but she said, my whole life, I've spent so much energy being upset that things weren't fair. You know what I'm saying? She just was constantly thinking, this isn't fair, and it's not right, and so forth. And she finally realized that every system is not fair, just a matter of who, in fact, gets the benefits of it. So she was very, very touched by that. So life's not fair. And as I said, the market does offer the broadest means of competition. So economics, micro, is about the study of individual decision making, both in choosing what jobs to take and what products to buy and when to spend money and on what. And then macro is the study of the entire economic system. So it's the study of how Congress influences the economy, how the president has no influence on the economy whatsoever. But if things are good, they take credit for it, and if things are bad, they get blamed for it, right? It's fascinating, but really, the economy's the economy. By the way, the Dow Jones is down 340 points as of an hour ago. There are alternative ways that choices are made within within our system. Some are made through this representative system where we elect people to make the decisions on certain kinds of things. And then economic and market decisions are made by 330 million people as they make individual choices, and hundreds of thousands of business firms as they make choices on what to produce and so forth. So this simple diagram called the circular flow model is a simple representation of the economic system of exchange. Primarily, you have two economic agents. Households make three kinds of decisions. Business firms are thought of as groups of people working as teams, and so households provide the use of resources to the business firms. Resources includes your labor, but it also includes your ownership of buildings or land and those kinds of things. And through what's called the resource markets, business firms choose which of these resources to acquire to produce their particular goods and services. And they give money back in exchange for the use of your time, and that becomes the flow of income. And then business firms spend all this time trying to figure out what it is people want, and they make their decisions of which inputs to use and then what goods and services to produce. What characteristics will I include in the products that I'm in fact making or the services that I'm in fact making? And 2/3 of that is sold back to American households, and the other is sold to abroad and government entities and NGOs and so forth and so on. Households and others provide a flow of dollars back to the firms. That is called revenue, as we talked about. And you can see the exchange that's taking place in each case. In fact, you'll notice that dollars form the internal ring of exchange. Dollars are exchanged, to you for the use of the resources. Dollars are exchanged to business firms for the products and services they're in fact producing. And then I've introduced a third set of markets called credit markets. And that is exchanges of the use of money over time. Exchanges of the use of money over time. Households normally are providers to this market as you build your 401ks or pension plans or those kinds of things, choosing to lend out money now and have it available when you retire. And you all are going to live a much longer period of time than you now think you're going to live. So I highly recommend beginning to put money away now and make it a regular part of your life, right? Just automatic. Have it deducted, and I'll give advice about it later. Good. Business firms want to acquire the use of dollars earlier in their process to buy the buildings and buy the raw materials and pay the labor until they've produced the goods or services, and then they get a flow of money back from which they will pay for the use of that money. So that is the economic exchange system. We make assumptions about our two economic agents. We assume households are trying to maximize what we call utility, which is simply long-run personal satisfaction. In what job you take, in when you spend money, what you spend it on, all of those are assumed to be made trying to maximize personal satisfaction over time. Business firms are assumed to be maximizing economic profit. And profit, as you know, is the flow of revenue coming in minus the economic cost of the resources being used. The economic cost of the resources being used is economic profit. And then markets are simply the interaction of these two groups of buyers and sellers. As we said, households are the providers in the resource markets. They are the buyers in the product markets, and they can go both ways in the credit markets. And then finally, the role of money is critical because money is what's used for all these exchanges. We discovered during the Great Depression, the entire economy just tanked. And we had 25-30% unemployment for years and years. And the whole system was broken. And here was the building that had all the equipment in it to make shoes. And then here are all the guys living in the village who know how to run the equipment. And then here are all the people who need to have shoes. And it didn't work. The system wasn't working. And we finally discovered, ex post, meaning looking backward, that it was the lack of money in the system which caused the Great Depression to continue for the time period it did. And Milton Friedman and his wife actually put together the monetary history of the United States, in which they were able to show that the money supply had declined by almost a third and that there just wasn't enough money. World War II came along, the central government started just giving contracts for everything, and the central bank financed that by buying the bonds. So the money supply increased, and that's what got us out of the Great Depression. So scarcity implies three kinds of choices that people have to make. Number one, what will be produced? That's determined in the market system by dollar votes. Two, what is the method of production? Again, determined by business firms attempting to maximize profit and produce as efficiently as possible. And three, for whom to produce. And as we said, the goods are allocated to those who are willing and able to spend the dollars on them. Good. So that's the whole module of the first set of information.